what I wanted to talk about is the word queer. When I tag my videos, when I talk about issues within the quote-unquote gay community, I have to write queer politics, and that always bothers me a little bit because I really disagree with the use of the word queer as an umbrella term. And I'll explain why later, but let me first explore why we use queer in the first place. The idea behind queer as a term to describe the collective of non-straight people is the idea that we are reclaiming a negative term and using it as a source of pride. And this has happened many times throughout history. We see it in the Revolutionary War. Americans used to be called Yankees by the British, and we reclaimed that, and now all of a sudden it became great to be a Yankee. You know, we were proud to be Yanks, you know. We see it in modern day. We see it with the term black. Before there was time in our history when black was considered a derogatory way, but now we see it within the black community, and then on top of that we see the reclaiming of the N-word from within the black community as a, you know, and there are other examples of this. Even in subtle ways, ginger is now coming back in the sense that ginger's no longer a bad thing. But anyway, so that's why we see the use of queer as the idea is that we're centering around queer. We're using it and saying, yeah, we're queer. Fuck you. You know, you gave us this name and we're gonna run with it. However, I've never been called queer. You know, I know that historically it's an insult, but if we're gonna talk about the insult, you see, here's the thing. Not everyone's a queer in the eyes of the, oppressive, gay-bashing, gun-toting folk. Not everyone's a queer, but everyone is a faggot, right? So why aren't we using that term? Is it too offensive? And, the fact of the matter is that, you see all the time on YouTube these videos saying, don't say faggot. You don't know what that does to me. And I myself don't enjoy saying it. I almost always avoid saying it unless there's the proper context, in which case I'm saying it now. And it does have a huge effect on me. But to say, don't say that word, and then use queer to define an entire community, that makes no sense. When in fact a good percentage of the gay community uses the word faggot all the time. You see it all the time. Oh, don't mind me, I'm just a fag, or stuff like that. And it's like, it's just another example of the inherent division between what we call the gay community. Because here's the thing. It's like I've said 100 times. There is no gay community. There's no queer community. Because there's so many fucking divisions. The only thing in common that we really have with all of us is the fact that we are not straight. And the fact that straight people will oppress or have prejudice against us because of heterosexism or homophobia, and this is really the only thing we have in common. But instead of really coming together over that and fighting that, we don't. We divide. We there's so much shit going on, you know. So the gay people within the queer community are the majority, and so therefore they get to define everything else for everyone else. And that's why I don't follow the whole queer community thing, because I myself am not what you would call queer. I've never been called queer. It would be an inaccurate description of me. And I don't feel, and to say that I should, you know, drop my identity and unite and take pride in something that I'm not, is just another example of the insensitivity towards people within the queer community who aren't actually queer. And another perfect example is, supposing you're in one of these GSAs or whatever, right? And we're all here because we're queer, right? And all that shit. But if you bring up any idea, and you're having a discussion about it, but supposing you bring up the fact that you're not gay, or supposing the fact that you bring up the idea that someone, you know, I mean, if you go against the grain in these queer communities, you're looked on as like a threat to the stability of the entire group the minute you begin to critique anything. And I shouldn't be too harsh on the queer community for this response, because that's actually true in every single community that we have in America. People do not like to be criticized. People do not like to be questioned. No one likes it when someone, you know, asks, why the fuck are we doing this? Why can't we do it this way? What is the point of this? You know, blah, blah, blah. People don't like that, you know, but the fact of the matter is that we should be thinking critically of every single system, of every single institution. We can't just sit and say, no, fuck the Republicans, fuck the conservatives, fuck the religious assholes. We can't just say that and not be willing to criticize our own foundations, our own principles, and our own way of life. Because the fact of the matter is that all these queer groups, you know, they all stand for this great pride and everything, when in fact they, you know, if you begin to ask the question, hey, how do you guys feel about people of color within the queer community, they're like, what? You know, and it's just like, you know, there are some stuff that never gets addressed, and that is why that is specifically why I do not, you know, things that aren't addressed, you know, like transgender community, like I took part in a GSA earlier this year, and we went around introducing ourselves, and if it hadn't been for the one transgendered person within the group, no one would have said, please state your name, your major, and if you identify as male or female. Otherwise, it would have just been name and major. You know, if that one girl wasn't there, no one would have thought about it. And nobody would have even thought about it, because we just assumed that we're all the same thing. We're all queer. Well, guess what? I'm not fucking queer. I'm not. What it boils down to is that every time, you know, someone tells me, no, we're the queer community, we want, you know, people to identify, we want to take back the word queer and change it from a negative to a positive. And then I look at them and I say, okay, so I'm not necessarily queer, so like, why don't we call it the faggot community, you know, or why don't we call it the faggot coalition, you know, and then they go, oh, well, you know, we can't have that. And it's like, no, because, you see, when I'm getting chased down a street with a bunch of people with baseball bats and rope, they're going to be calling me faggot, not queer, you know, they're going to be calling every single one of us within this community, they're going to be calling us that. And that's the truth. And the fact of the matter is that we all call each other that all the time within this community. And that's the truth. No one uses queer, okay? So why? Why the fuck are we using that? Why? Especially given the fact that not all of us are actually queer. These are questions that I would like addressed within these groups. And that's my shtick. And in the meantime, I would like every single gay user of YouTube to stop making all of these fucking feel-good videos, because the fact of the matter is that a lot of us within the gay community are alienated, isolated, and ignored. So don't even begin to think of addressing me like we're the same. Don't even fuck. Until you begin to address, acknowledge, identify, and respect my presence as a bisexual male within your community, and the presence of everyone else in between, then I am never, ever gonna identify as queer. Ever.